You have meticulously engineered a life of significant achievement, constructing formidable financial fortresses and navigating the most complex global markets with surgical precision. Yet despite this immense structural success, a primitive and silent vulnerability continues to compromise your absolute executive power. It is the deeply ingrained biological desperation to belong to the herd. From the dawn of human history, survival dictated that isolation meant certain death, forcing our ancestors to prioritize tribal consensus above individual clarity. Fast forward to the modern arena of high-stakes power dynamics, and this ancient survival mechanism has transformed into a catastrophic liability. The herd inherently despises exceptionalism because it highlights their own collective mediocrity and lack of vision. Every single time you subconsciously seek validation from your peers, dilute your strategic vision to accommodate group consensus, or fear the social friction of standing completely alone, you are actively hemorrhaging your sovereign power. The absolute apex of global dominance is never achieved by a committee or through democratic agreement. It is forged in the silent, unforgiving vacuum of profound solitude, where only the strongest minds survive. You must recognize that the crowd does not offer safety. It only offers an aggressive regression to the mean designed to strip you of your unique executive velocity. To truly command your empire and cement your legacy, you must sever this obsolete biological tether, completely step out of the comforting warmth of the collective and embrace the chilling and compromising clarity of absolute isolation. The profound danger of remaining integrated within the collective mindset lies in the continuous and devastating erosion of your cognitive capital. When you operate within a social matrix, your mental bandwidth is continuously hijacked by the ambient emotional noise of the group. You are forced to process their anxieties, navigate their fragile egos, and constantly recalibrate your own behavioral output to avoid triggering their collective insecurities. This exhausting psychological maintenance leaves you with a fraction of your actual intellectual capacity to deploy toward true strategic dominance. Elite cognitive researchers confirm that groupthink acts as a powerful gravitational pull, dragging even the most brilliant minds down to the lowest common denominator of acceptable thought. By remaining tethered to the herd, you are effectively running a supercomputer on an ancient, corrupted operating system. The world's most sovereign leaders understand that absolute power requires an absolute monopoly on their own attention. They strategically engineer periods of profound isolation not as a retreat from reality, but as a highly aggressive maneuver to purge their mental architecture of inferior external programming. Solitude allows your mind to defragment, separating your true executive voice from the inherited fears of the masses. If you refuse to physically and psychologically separate yourself from the noisy consensus, you will remain forever trapped in a cycle of mediocre execution and shared delusion. To genuinely conquer this primal fear of isolation, we must examine the undeniable strategic advantages of maintaining an impenetrable psychological perimeter. The crowd operates on predictability, transparency, and constant emotional feedback. When you detach from this grid, you instantly become a strategic black hole. You stop broadcasting your intentions, your anxieties, and your operational limits to the surrounding environment. This sudden deprivation of data is utterly terrifying to the herd and incredibly disorienting to your adversaries. They can no longer map your psychological topography or anticipate your next maneuver. While they expend massive amounts of energy seeking validation and broadcasting their every move, you remain perfectly still, absorbing their data while offering absolutely nothing in return. This profound opacity is the ultimate executive weapon. It forces your competitors to operate in complete darkness, projecting their own worst fears and insecurities onto your silence. By mastering the art of the sovereign withdrawal, you transform the simple act of absence into an overwhelming presence. You occupy space in their minds precisely because you refuse to occupy space in their trivial social circles. This is the exact moment the amateur panics at the feeling of being left out while the true master architect smiles, knowing they have just secured absolute tactical supremacy. As you solidify your position within this engineered isolation, a fascinating and highly exploitable psychological phenomenon begins to manifest within your counterparts. Human nature absolutely abhors a vacuum, especially an emotional one. When people encounter a leader who is perfectly content in their own absolute solitude, they experience a profound sense of psychological vertigo. Their innate hierarchical programming is short-circuited because you are no longer playing by the rules of tribal submission. Desperate to re-establish a connection and decode your silence, they will instinctively begin to overcompensate. They will rush to fill the void you have created, offering unprompted concessions, volunteering sensitive strategic intelligence, and nervously attempting to win the favor of the very person who has completely detached from their game. Without you having to raise your voice, make a demand, or issue a single threat, the surrounding environment begins to aggressively restructure itself to serve your silent authority. Your unshakable comfort in solitude signals a terrifying level of self-sufficiency and resource abundance. It silently communicates that you require absolutely nothing from them, which paradoxically makes them desperate to give you everything. This is the ultimate architecture of control, where your mere existence in a state of isolated perfection forces the entire board to bow to your sovereign will. However, achieving this level of devastating sovereign isolation cannot be accomplished through mere physical separation or antisocial posturing. Simply locking yourself in a luxury office while your mind remains desperately starved for external validation is a recipe for severe psychological collapse. True elite solitude requires a fundamental and irreversible restructuring of your deepest neurological pathways. You must actively train your dopamine system to stop rewarding you for cheap social consensus, and begin intensely rewarding you for absolute cognitive independence. You must learn to look at the chaotic, turbulent noise of the herd, not with a sense of longing but with the sterile, detached observation of an apex predator watching a flock of frightened birds. We are about to reveal the exact psychological protocols and cognitive conditioning techniques utilized exclusively by the world's most formidable executives to sever their biological need for the herd. This is the blueprint for building an impenetrable mental fortress where your absolute power is generated internally, completely insulated from the shifting winds of public opinion. Are you entirely prepared to endure the initial, freezing shock of true isolation in order to finally seize uncompromising control over your entire psychological and physical reality? Welcome to your exclusive guided cognitive restructuring protocol designed for absolute strategic isolation. You do not need extreme wilderness retreats to fundamentally alter your psychological baseline. We begin with a principle called deliberate sensory starvation. Your nervous system currently perceives the constant influx of social feedback as a vital resource for navigating your executive environment. You must forcefully shift this dynamic by intentionally severing these chaotic input streams during critical decision-making windows. This specific cognitive deprivation directly starves the fragile emotional pathways in your brain that seek external validation, and actively rebuilds an impenetrable psychological callus. When a counterpart attempts to flood your bandwidth with urgent demands, frantic emails, or manufactured social pressure, you must train yourself to completely disconnect and retreat into your engineered void. You will rapidly realize that their frantic noise possesses absolutely zero physical power over your reality. ensuring ultimate immunity and a terrifyingly calm exterior that completely destabilizes their tactical framework. By mastering the art of the sudden strategic withdrawal, you force the entire ecosystem to pause and wait for your inevitable return. This is the exact moment you transition from being a participant in the herd to becoming the absolute gravitational center of the interaction. To successfully complement your isolation protocol, we must master the precise psychological calibration of your internal executive voice. The amateur attempts to find clarity by crowdsourcing opinions, forming endless committees and seeking a comforting consensus that inevitably dilutes their original brilliant vision. The true master architect of profound dominance simply locks the door, shuts off the noise, and listens exclusively to the cold, hard logic of their own unfiltered intellect. You must consciously engage your analytical faculties in total silence, stripping away the emotional residue left behind by the anxieties of your peers and subordinates. This specific mental mastery creates an immense unbearable pressure on your competitors, who are desperately searching for external clues to guide their own mediocre strategies. It powerfully neutralizes their collective groupthink and forces them to confront a leader who operates with terrifying absolute certainty. Combining this profound internal clarity with a completely detached physical presence ensures your psychological machinery operates flawlessly without triggering any internal panic or projecting the slightest hint of reliance on the herd. You become an impenetrable fortress of independent thought, generating strategies that are light years ahead of the stagnant consensus. The next critical pillar of our elite psychological protection protocol involves engineering an uncompromising mastery of tactical absence. Your mind requires a dedicated defense against the relentless primal urge to be constantly visible and accessible, which inherently drives subordinate behavior and devalues your executive premium. Simply possessing a quiet office is not a passive luxury, it is an aggressive biological strategy if properly combined with strategic unavailability. You must intentionally anchor your identity in the undeniable reality that whoever is least accessible in a high-stakes dynamic invariably controls the ultimate leverage. When presented with a chaotic crisis or a demanding negotiation, you must deploy your absolute solitude and let your absence stretch until it becomes physically agonizing for the other party. Any ambient emotional need to rush in and save the day severely blunts your strategic capacity and resets their respect for your time. Protecting this delicate internal detachment from the social obligation to constantly perform is absolutely non-negotiable for maintaining ultimate structural power and forcing them to solve their own problems while negotiating against themselves to secure a fraction of your attention. You have successfully navigated ruthless global markets, built magnificent financial empires, and secured a legacy that will outlast your generation. Your psychological resilience and your mastery of profound solitude represent the ultimate enterprise that demands the most sophisticated level of executive management. Refuse to accept the flawed narrative that constant connectivity and frantic social integration are the unavoidable taxes on human interaction and business success. You possess the unparalleled resources, the sharp intellect, and now the precise cognitive knowledge to completely rewrite your emotional destiny and sever the tether to the herd. Imagine the profound liberating peace of mind knowing your internal foundation is as robust and impenetrable as the financial fortress you have constructed. Picture yourself effortlessly dominating any interaction, remaining completely unbothered by the chaotic noise of the masses, and securing every advantage without a single shadow of doubt. True executive power is absolute psychological independence forged in the silent fires of your own engineered isolation. It is time to take definitive action and elevate your mental portfolio to the highest possible standard of global dominance. Start today by implementing our guided sensory starvation routines and strictly engineering your internal clarity and tactical absence strategies. Share this essential masterclass with your peers and loved ones who also value their executive vitality and psychological independence above all else. Your absolute mental integrity and impenetrable sovereign exterior constitute your ultimate future. And it is never too late to reinforce it with absolute cognitive certainty. We are dedicated to providing you with the most advanced scientifically validated strategies for a truly golden and crystal clear life. Please subscribe to our exclusive channel to join a global community of distinguished individuals who refuse to compromise on their sovereignty, and who understand that the one who masters solitude masters the world. Maintain your absolute stillness, step away from the herd, and stay eternally golden.